Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and a ranked game. This has maybe been a little overshadowed by all the other stuff that's happened with 8.0, and in fact there's some somewhat major changes happening with 8.1 as well. But yeah, ranked has been a bit different this season. It's basically been using the mechanics from Arms Race. In fact, it's basically been Arms Race battles except with a smaller number of players per side. Now, if you're totally unfamiliar with Arms Race, basically you don't get a cap circle until 8 minutes in, and all throughout the game you have these boosters which can be capped by either side, and they give you various stacking bonuses such as a ticking heal, faster gun reload, reduced rudder shift and reduced surface detectability. Obviously the most useful one for all classes is that ticking heal, but there are others that can be quite handy as well, especially as they stack up throughout the game. And if you are the player to actually get the bonus, then you, as you can see there, you actually get a doubled effect. Everybody gets the benefit of it, but if you cap it, you get twice the benefit, as it were. So it can be quite valuable if you are the one to be doing the capping. Of course, that's more likely to be destroyers than not, but in this case Giorgio has managed to get in there, so he's already doubled up on that ticking heal. Probably the biggest issue overall this time round has been the fact that it's been tier 9. Nothing to do with the mechanics of Arms Race even at all. It's just the fact that at tier 9 there are some very dominant premium and special ships like the Musashi or the Jean Bart, and to a lesser extent things like the Black and the Kronstadt, but the Musashi especially, with its ability to just pen everything. I'm sure there were more than a few that were actually, you know, queuing up to play, and having talked to one or two people who actually did do a bit of ranked, it was always a case of they got a bit of a sinking feeling if there was an Izumo or a Friedrich de Grosse on their team and the other team had Musashis and Jean Barts, because the other team then just had straight up better ships. I mean, the Musashi, apart from anything else, has got that bigger health pool. Giorgio, however, is in a distinctly unpremium ship. This is the Buffalo. This is what replaced the Baltimore as the tier 9 US heavy cruiser. And, well, it's a US heavy cruiser. I think this particular design was a paper ship, to use the parlance of World of Warships. This one was never actually built. It was a proposed upgrade, and then I think it basically just got supplanted by the Des Moines class instead. So yeah, this one never actually saw the light of day, but as far as warships is concerned, it's a pretty competent tier 9 heavy cruiser, and you know, it's reasonably stealthy, it's got reasonably hard-hitting guns, the reload's alright. It gets both the heal and a radar, although of course you can use the, not heal and radar, hydro and radar, although you can use a defensive in place of the hydro, which might be the more common thing to use these days, I don't know. I've been taking a bit of a break from warships, which is partly why I haven't done any videos on carriers or anything like that, but also just a break from multiplayer games generally. I've been catching up on things like Stellaris, put some hours into playing that, because I've actually been kind of evaluating. I've been thinking about doing a Stellaris campaign for a while, but I don't think the game is in a good state for that at the moment. That's the conclusion I've come to. Basically, I don't know if, like, some of you may have played Stellaris, some of you may know things about Stellaris, but there's been one game element, and that is sectors, that has always been a bit of a problem and is now in basically the worst state it's ever been. They've actually managed to make it worse. Some of the other changes they've made have been good. Stellaris is not unlike World of Warships in the publisher, the developer, have made major changes to game mechanics since it was released, and the net effect has been quite positive, but sectors are probably in the worst state they've ever been. And so managing lots and lots of planets at the moment is actively a chore. It is not a fun thing to do at all. And it actively discourages you from making big empires because the sector AI is utterly incompetent. You can't leave it in the hands of the computer. You have to do it yourself. And once you get to the stage of having dozens and dozens of planets to micromanage, yeah, that gets old very quickly. So I'm holding off on Stellaris for the time being, but I do have something else in mind to maybe start a playthrough series of, because that's maybe been a bit lacking, and I need to get back to doing Star Wars as well. Anyway, I've completely sidetracked myself, but honestly there's not that much happening at this stage, so it's fine. I can witter a bit. Both teams have been sort of just milling around. There's been a bit of contesting of the boosters, but the enemy teams managed to pick up a couple, and they've only gotten 3 themselves so far, so I guess the enemy team probably has a slight advantage at the moment in terms of the boosters, but nothing decisive, and they've at least traded ships evenly as well, although somehow the enemy team has more cap points, not more cap points, more victory points. I'm not actually sure if that is tied to capturing the boosters. Maybe that gives you a fixed amount of victory points as you do it. Because otherwise, you know, there's no ticking victory points up until the point where the cap circle appears, and that's not going to happen for another 30 seconds yet. This does seem to be a very good fit, by the way, for ranked. I suspect we'll be seeing this as a part of future ranked games. As a kind of standalone random special mode, Arms Race was okay, but fitting it in with ranked, I think has worked very well, just because of the way the boosters interact with what's going on otherwise. It does seem to me like the main issue was this time that it was tier 9. And actually one of my Patreon supporters kind of wondered out loud, as it were, why not just not allow the premium and special ships? And I can kind of see that as a solution. You know, if you're doing ranked, make sure it's an even playing field, that you don't have any premium ships, which sometimes can be the strongest ships available for a given tier. But at the same time, I can see that causing a bit of a backlash. So I don't know. I'm not sure I can see Wargaming actually implementing that. It might not be the most popular decision, even though it might be a more fair way to do ranked games. So that's a nice broadside and a couple of citadels to go with it. So he's managed to punish that rune hard, and they start to angle in a hurry because they don't want that to happen again. But yeah, that might well have been the fatal blow, as it were, just taking that much health off that rune in one go. And the enemy team is also getting the benefit of a ticking heal as well, but that doesn't stop you, you know, if you lose large chunks of health in one go, that doesn't stop you then being put in a very vulnerable position, as the rune was. And it's actually the Z46 that gets the kill, but the rune then torpedoes them. So yeah, it looked like they were maybe going to survive, and then unfortunately they just fell afoul of that dying spread of torpedoes. So that just leaves, as his remaining teammate, this Fletcher. But the Fletcher is looking not good right now. In fact, they're looking dead. And that just leaves Giorgio against the Jutland, who is somewhat of a threat, although not that much, because of course he has radar and hydro, and he's actually making his first use of the radar in this game to get some shots off, do a bit of damage, and maybe he'll get the kill. But this Jutland is just about to go out of radar range, I think, so it looks like they'll get away with it. But the Musashi is absolutely the main threat right now, because of course those guns, they don't care about your armour. Even if he was in a really well armoured cruiser, it would not matter facing those 18.1 inch guns. There is such a thing, however, as being complacent, even if you are in theoretically a superior position. And I think that basically explains what we're going to see in this second phase of the battle, because this is where this replay does start to get more interesting. Not that it hasn't been bad so far. I mean, he's up to nearly 100,000 damage. It's been a pretty decent game, and it's also, of course, showed off these arms race mechanics quite well. But no, this is where it's going to get interesting, because now it's 2 versus 1, and he's in a cruiser versus something with very big guns. And it's not like he's got torpedoes to rely on, because if he did have torpedoes, well, the ticking heel means he's now back nearly at full health, just simply trying to rush down this Musashi and pump them full of torps. You know, if this was an Ibuki, for instance, that would be enough to kill the Musashi. The Rune, maybe not so much. The Rune only gets a single spread of torps. I'm trying to think what else has torps at this tier. The Donskor gets torps, but I don't think it has enough of them. And what else is there? I think those might be the only 3. This is always dangerous when I'm trying to, you know, remember stuff. But anyway, neither of the 2 US cruisers at this tier has torps, of course. The only cruisers over tier 5 for the US that do have torps are the Flint and the Atlanta. Of course, they're both tier 7, and they're not particularly powerful torps for their tier either. So yeah, they're kind of irrelevant to the discussion, but you know, it's just, that's my factoid for this video, is those are the only US cruisers over that tier that have torps. And there's probably a semi-interesting discussion on the philosophy of US cruisers as to why, and maybe even an interesting discussion on why they decided that the Atlanta class were going to have torpedoes after they abandoned it as a philosophy for all other classes of ships. But I'm not really the kind of person that would have that knowledge. I'd have to go and look it up, and then I would have to think of a way of presenting it that was sort of interesting, and that's not really my forte either. So what we've got is a cruiser without torpedoes, and an enemy player that absolutely knows it, and an enemy player with very big guns that can absolutely tear this ship a new one. But here's where that complacency comes into play. This Musashi is clearly thinking, okay, I'm in the superior position, I can just kind of sit here and take it, because surely I'm going to kill this Buffalo before they can kill me, because they don't have torpedoes. They just have to rely on their guns. The reason I'm making this assumption is 100% purely based on the angling, or rather the lack thereof, from this Musashi. And really, considering Giorgio's gunnery here, he maybe even could have been taking more advantage of this, because at the kind of ranges he's fighting, he is using AP at times. In fact, he'll start to use AP a lot more once he's firing back at the Musashi, because at the moment he's clearly concentrating a little more on the Jutland, which is also still a factor. He can't forget the Jutland. They're less of a threat, but those torps still could kill him. But no, the amount of broadside the Musashi is giving him, he could actually get, theoretically, citadel shots, in fact, quite easily at this range. He has the penetration, and especially with the Musashi sitting even higher in the water than the Yamato. But instead he's going more for the upper belt shots, and he's still doing some damage. It's just, you know, he's not maybe doing quite as much damage as he could be doing. But the Musashi is making an absolutely fatal mistake here, and I think they're only just starting to realise it. Now, Giorgio used the island for cover, and it was actually just high enough that he was able to be unspotted at points. But the Musashi has, in their utter complacency, just sat there and actually gotten a bit closer, and so Giorgio is now in a position to rush them. And he's pounding away all the while. He's taken horrible amounts of damage himself, but it's not been enough to outright kill him. And with the ticking heel, with his own tier 9 cruiser heel, he's been able to survive. And now the Musashi has started to realise their mistake, because the turret traverse on the Musashi is not good. You can try and go for an optimal turret traverse build, but what you'll tend to find, and what is often, to be fair, the best way to build your high tier battleships is that people will go for rate of fire instead, and that can come at the cost. In fact, if you're going for the best possible rate of fire, it will come at the cost of turret traverse. And the Musashi and the Yamato do not have a good base turret traverse at all. In fact, you can get it up to, if you're going for the best possible rate of fire, it goes up to something like 72 seconds. And so what's happened is they've let Giorgio get way too close, and he's just been able to circle them to death, and this Musashi has now very nearly run out of hit points. He's got his own ticking heal going, he's got his own regular battleship heal going, but he was never going to beat the rate of fire of even a heavy cruiser. Maybe if Giorgio had been in, what's the tier 9 light cruiser? I've completely forgotten. But anyway, if they'd been in a light cruiser with that faster rate of fire, with the IFHE, maybe they would have been a bit more proactive, a little less complacent. But as it is, they absolutely let Giorgio get away with, well, not quite literally murder. It's not murder in the context of this game, but you know what I mean. And being able to get that kill has put them in the lead points-wise. And so, although there is this Jutland still alive, and although he's not going to get to kill this Jutland, it doesn't really matter. The Musashi was absolutely the main threat, and they're now dead, and this Jutland, unless they'd somehow caught him completely by surprise, yeah, there's not a lot he can do about it. Hell, the Jutland could potentially have used that circle strafe of death to get a bit closer and maybe drop some torps, although that would have been extremely risky with the Musashi there as well. But if the Musashi was going to die anyway, they could have used the fact that Giorgio was 100% occupied with the Musashi to their advantage, and instead they kind of sat much further back, used a bit of rather ineffective gunfire, and, well, this is the game, really. We're in the dying seconds. And thanks to Giorgio and the complacency of that Musashi player, they've won. And it was absolutely that Musashi player letting Giorgio get away with that. I have no doubt whatsoever that the Musashi would not have done that had he been facing a cruiser with torpedoes. As it was, we went from 100,000 just about to ending the match with 271,000 and a quite convincing carry. And not only that, but over 3,000 base XP, which is not half bad. And clearly that Musashi was doing something. They were top of their own team. 1,454 base XP on a loss is not bad. But being in the superior position does not equate to meaning the same thing as having won. Overconfidence can entirely be fatal, as it was in this case. So there you go. That's how you turn a winning position into a losing one, as far as the enemy team's concerned, and how you turn a losing one into a winning one, as far as Giorgio and his heavy cruiser is concerned. So that was quite a good match. It was a bit of a slow start, maybe, but I think it was worth the conclusion. And it was also just interesting to see the ranked mechanics in action a bit as well. I'm sure plenty of people have been streaming it, but I've not seen too many videos on ranked this season. Although, to be fair, I've maybe not been particularly looking out for them. It's quite possible there have been some people who've been putting up videos from their ranked play experience, but people seem to have been concentrating a lot more on carriers and the changes that have occurred with that class for perhaps obvious reasons. That does rather seem to have overshadowed patch 8.0. And I did consider doing a video on myself, but honestly, I don't have that much to say on it so far. I mean, my position hasn't really changed since all the preview and test server stuff. I think there are certainly still some balance issues to be worked out. I have no doubt Wargaming is working hard on it, and I'm just kind of sitting back and waiting and seeing, really, how the balance changes work out, because there have been a few maybe slightly too wild swings in terms of effectiveness of AA versus effectiveness of planes, but it's all quite new yet. People don't know what normal is, and only Wargaming themselves really have an idea of what they want the kind of average damage and average XP and average survivability of carriers to be, and you know, the effectiveness of AA versus carriers. So I'm willing to have a bit of patience on this one. I don't want to be that person that jumps up and down and goes, oh my god, it's all broken and it's trash and Wargaming should just take the carriers out completely, because I don't doubt there have been that there has been more than enough of that on the forums, and probably from some video makers and streamers as well, because that's always the temptation, is to just instantly go for the most hyperbolic reaction. But no, I'm willing to give Wargaming a bit of time to work out the kinks on this one. So, you know, if it's still completely wonky in like a month's time, at that point, you know, I might do a video or something. But no, for the time being, I'm content to just wait and see. Anyway, so, you know, that's it. That's my reaction to the carriers. Not really worth a separate video, I don't think. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this replay, and if you did, you can do all the usual things down underneath it. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.